Well, good evening again, everyone. Good evening, good evening. We are back this evening for the continuation of our Bible study, and should have some of my other elders joining me shortly. Pastor is supposed to be on as well. We are focusing on the book of Daniel, chapter 7, and Daniel, chapter 8. Good afternoon, Elder Kingston. Welcome. Have you again this evening. And we are focusing again this week on the study of Daniel 7 and Daniel 8. Elsie out of town, but she had showed me that she would be joining us. Don't know if she's able to get on. Pastor will be joining us shortly too. So we had a very interesting lesson last week where we were looking at Daniel chapter 7, which really is a recap of Daniel chapter 2. And also we talk about the pre-advent judgment in Daniel 7. And we focus also on the different beasts, which is sort of similar to the different metals from the image that Daniel saw in his dream in Daniel chapter 2. So it's basically the same thing. One deals with metal, and the other one deals with animals, with beasts, right? And just a quick recap here, Kingston, before we go over into chapter 8. We look at the vision and the judgment. We look at the pre-advent judgment. And then we also saw Daniel talking about the four beasts. And we see where the different beasts represent the same powers as seen in Daniel chapter 2. We look at the time of the judgment. We saw all of that too. And we also looked at a few things as it relates to the most powerful power that came on the scene, which was the little horn power. We looked at some characteristics of the little horn. And after we look at the characteristics of the little horn, we also looked at how we really identify that the little horn and how it applies to the papacy. We talk about the little horns which came up out of Western Europe as we look at Daniel 7 verse 8. And the only power at that time was Rome, Western Europe. We look at the time span. The little horn arose after 476 AD. We looked at that. We look at the fact that the little horn uprooted 3 of the 10 horns, and we spoke about the 10 horns in the modern nations of Europe. And we saw where the little horn rooted up 3 of them, took them out of existence completely. And we also look at the fact that the little horn has a man at its head, was a human leader. We also look at the fact that the little horn is a different kind of power than the 10 horns. We also look at the fact that little horn spoke great word of blasphemy against God, according to Daniel 7 verse 25. We look at the fact that little horn exercised power over God's people and persecute God's people. We look at the fact that little horn attempt to change God's laws and time. And we look at the reigning period of little horn after 1260 years, as referred to in Revelation 12, time and dividing of times, which still worked out to be 1260 years. So those were the characteristics of the little horn. And we also looked at the how does it apply to the papacy? Because when we mentioned we came out of Western Europe, you know, that was, of course, was in Rome. And we looked at the fact that the little horn papacy started after 476, which was 538 AD when it started. So we know it was applying to the papacy. We look at the fact that a little horn rooted up 3 of the powers of the 10, and those 3 were the Vandals, the Ostrogoths, and the Heruli during the time of its reign. The last one to be stamped out, as we mentioned here, was the Ostrogoths in 538 AD. We also looked at the fact a little horn have a man at its head, and we say that we saw where the papacy exalt the Pope as its human head and supreme authority. We also saw where the little horn claiming that it has political authority, religious authority. We saw where the little horn spoke against the Most High and have as its head what is called the Holy Father, and claim that they can forgive sins, exercising blasphemy and all those things. And we looked at the persecution of God's people, where we saw the blood stain and putting off over 50 million Christians to death in the dark ages, wearing out the saints. And we saw where the little horn would attempt to change God's law. And we looked at the fact how they manipulated and changed up the order in which the commandments are placed, and what they omitted because of their allegiance to the bowing down of images in worship of Mary. So they had to take out the one that talked about thou shalt not bow down thyself. And as a result, they would have been left with 9. Number 4 is pushed up to number 3, and number 10 was split in 2. And we look at the fact that the little horn was to reign for a period of 1206 years. Now, this evening, we want to look at the Day of Atonement as it reaches up to Daniel chapter 4. And remember, we used this big word last week, the eschatological, meaning the end time study. So Daniel chapter 8 is where we are this week. Daniel chapter 8. And that's a very interesting chapter here, because now we're going to be looking at some different kinds of animals too, representing either Persia, Babylon, Greece, and all that, just like how we look at Daniel 7. But Daniel 7, Daniel 8, Daniel 2, they're all kind of intertwined. Would you agree, Ella Kingston?
Yeah, but what if you notice here in Daniel chapter 8, the animals that are here prefigured are animals that are associated with the temple service, with the
Yes.
sanctuary service. The ram and the goat, these were animals that were offered as sin offering, animals used on the Day of Atonement. So it to my mind, it takes us closely to what is that this power is going to mess or try to involve itself in God's work or to manipulate in their mind the work of God, right? The he goat, the ram, and the eagle. And even though the Bible clearly gave us an explanation as to who the ram represent and who the goat represent, right? So as you said, the
Now we're
ram,
gonna see in the study. We're gonna see that in the study as to
yeah,
how this Daniel 8, how it interferes with the priestly ministry.
yeah,
Interferes with the priestly ministry. No wonder it's using sanctuary animals, right?
yeah, yeah.
So so when we look at the great judgment scene of Daniel 7, and as we studied last week, we see the same events as the cleansing of the sanctuary in Daniel 8,
yeah.
verse 14, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let us look at a comparison here again with the different animals representing a different kingdom. In Daniel 7, as we studied last week, we saw the head of we saw Babylon, the head of gold, as represented by which animal?
Lion.
That was the lion. But if you notice in Daniel chapter 8, we did not see that.
No.
There's no Babylon represented there.
Its reign came to an end.
Reign came to an end. That's right.
Yeah.
It wasn't mentioned. But then when you look at Media Persia, when I look at in Daniel 7, we saw the bear representing Media Persia.
Yeah.
And in Daniel 8, that was represented. It was represented by the ram.
The ram, yeah.
And the ram represented Media Persia in Daniel 8. Then
Yeah.
we saw in Daniel 7 as last week the leopard, which
Yes.
of course represented what?
Greece.
Greece. But in Daniel 8, which animal represented Greece?
The goat.
The he-goat.
Yeah.
The he-goat. Pushing all over the place from nobody could stop it. And of course, we know that was talking about Alexander, right?
Yep. Yeah.
The Great. Then we saw in Daniel 7 the fourth beast, which was the little horn. The fourth beast was a little horn in Daniel 7. And of course, it is made much clearer in Daniel 8. That is recorded as a little horn also. And of course, we know that the little horn represented Rome in its two phases, which was pagan Rome and papal Rome.
Yeah. Let us keep interacting with the audience. There's a question.
Oh, I didn't even go to the chat yet.
Where the ram and he-goat use symbols for Persia and Greece, as in symbols countries use in their coat of arms.
Where the ram and he-goat use symbols.
Yeah.
For Persia and Greece.
Mm-hmm.
As the symbols continue to use their, okay. I think maybe what he's asking is that, if I can understand what he's asking.
For example, like United States, the symbol is a great eagle.
Yes.
The great eagle represents the United States. So
yes,
these were there is no mention of the ram and the he-goat as a country symbol. What is mentioned in the coat of arms are the bear and the leopard. Right? The bear was Median Persian symbol.
Median Persia.
And the leopard was Greece symbol. You see, they could not have used the ram and the goat as their symbol, because when we go to the sanctuary service, animals represent Christ.
Yeah.
All right. So we can use these two as their symbol in the coat of arms. So in the coat of arms for Median Persia was the bear. And I think there are monuments in Europe, I think in Germany, where they have these animals displayed. They make replica of these animals, and they're saying the bear was Median Persians and the leopard was Greece.
Yes. All right. So the main aim that we're focusing on this week, remember Daniel 7, we look at the pre-Advent judgment.
Yeah.
Daniel 8 goes a little deeper. It goes to the cleansing of the sanctuary.
Yeah.
And what that really means is the eschatological day of atonement.
Yeah.
In other words, the end time, right?
The last.
We see also in Daniel 7 where there was a transfer of the kingdom to the saints.
Yeah.
Daniel 7. Transfer the kingdom to the saints. We did not see that in Daniel 8, but it actually, the interpretation of the transfer of the kingdom to the saints simply means the second coming of Christ.
Yeah.
Second coming and beyond. So what we're going to be looking at this week is the real issue. The real issue we're going to look at is a conflict between the horn power, between the horn power and God. And we will see also why the cleansing of the sanctuary really began, beginning in AD 1844. We'll see exactly that too.
Yeah.
So let us go over into Daniel chapter 8. That's where we are. And Daniel chapter 8, all the way from verse 1 to verse 9, just give us a scene here of the conflict that went on between the he-goat and the ram.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
was, the Median Persia and the Greece. Remember now that the Median Persian took over from Babylon, but Greece took over from Median Persia. So that's when you read from 1 verse 1 to about verse 9. As a matter of fact, we go down to verse 8. It says the he goat waxed very great. When he was strong, the great horn was broken, for it came up, and 4 notable ones towards the forehead. As a matter of fact, I think we should read from verse 1 just to give an overview all the way down. All right, what do you think, Ella?
Yeah.
So, Daniel chapter 8, I'll read verse 1 and you'll read verse 2, and we go on down until we reach verse 9. So, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. Notice he compared. He said it's about like the first one. So it's a similarity. Let's go, verse 2.
I saw in a vision, and it so happened while I was looking that I was in Shushan, the celestial, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw the vision that I saw by the river Ulai.
Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river of a ram, which had 2 horns. Note this here now. The ram had how many horns? 2 horns. The 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last.
Yep. I think you explained it last week.
Yeah, we did that last week.
Medes and the Persian,
Yes, the Medes and the Persian, and that one power was stronger than the other, one came up more powerful than the other. Yes.
I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, and southward, so that no animal could withstand him, nor was there any that could deliver from his hands. But he did according to his will, and became great.
So who are we looking at there? That ram. Who are we talking about here?
That's the Medes and the Persians.
Medes and the Persian. That's right. Yeah. So they were the ones who took over from Babylon. And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west. Notice where it came from? The west.
Yeah.
And you know, the Bible is so correct. Everything is precise, because when you look at where Alexander approached from, he was really from the west. Yeah. Right? I saw a concern, behold, the he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the he-goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Notice it mentioned it touched not the ground, which signifies what? Signifies speed.
Yeah,
coming with such power and speed. Yeah. Yes, rapidity. Nobody need to touch the ground. Read on, Ella. Verse 6.
Okay, then he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing beside the river. And he ran to him with furious power.
All right, verse 7. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram and brake his 2 horns. So the 2 horns, the Medes and the Persians, were dismantled, right?
Yeah.
And there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground, stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Now notice something here. Casting him down to the ground is one thing.
Yeah.
But stamping upon him signifies total annihilation.
Can't rise up
again.
No.
Can't rise up. So this is where Alexander the Great now came on the scene. Alexander the Great was a powerful man. He wiped out the Medes and the Persians. Let's look at verse 8.
Verse 8.
Go ahead.
Therefore, the male goat grew very great. But when he became strong, the large horn was broken, and in place of it, 4 notable ones came up towards the 4 winds of the heavens.
We talked about that last week.
Yeah.
Anybody remember it? We talked about that last week, where Alexander didn't last for any much long time. He was a drunkard. He loved to drink. So he lost. He was powerful for a short time. And when he died, we make mention that 4 generals did what? Took over.
Yeah.
Right. So we talked about it last week. And then now we are now at verse 9.
Yeah.
Here we're going to look at the little horns attack right here now. This is where the little horn attack. we're gonna see what's the effect of the attack of the little horn right here. So, and out of one of them came forth a little horn. Notice in Daniel 8, the definite word little horn is mentioned. A little horn, which waxed exceedingly great towards the south, towards the north, towards the east, and towards the pleasant land. So let's see, let me read from verse 9 to 14. And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven. Now look at this part here. Look at what little horn is doing now. He stretched forth his domain further, even to the host of heaven, and he cast down some of the hosts and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the hosts, and by him the daily sacrifice, look at this now, the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down, and a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? He said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Now, let's look at the little horn here. This part here is worthy of notice from verse 9 here down to about verse 14. The little horn power. So we see here where the little horn power start to interfere now with the worship of the divine. What he says, he went to the prince of the hosts.
Yeah.
And when he went to the prince of the hosts, it removes from the prince of the hosts the daily ministration, daily sacrifice, the daily sacrificial system in the earthly sanctuary service. It removes that, right? Now, this horn, the little horn here, this horn did something. It sought here to usurp the role of the priest, or the role of the high priest. And as a result, it instituted its counterfeit host. It took away the daily. In other words, what it did here, Christ's priestly ministry was attacked.
Yep.
And I'm going to show you how it attacked Christ's priestly ministry, what else it instituted. The little horn power usurped the responsibilities of the heavenly priest. And it also interrupted the continuous worship of God and God alone on earth.
So therefore we should establish who is the prince of the host.
Okay, go ahead.
So who is the prince of the host that he's attacking?
Yes. We're talking about the Lord.
Exactly. So we notice now that the other powers were attacking earthly dominion.
Yes.
This little power now moved from his attack on earthly dominion to try to attack the heavenly.
Yes.
Right. So because he said, and then my translation of verse 8, out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great. That's New King James.
Right.
Towards the south, towards the east, and towards a glorious land. So which is the glorious land? What is the glorious land?
Tell the folks they're listening.
Huh?
Tell the folks they're listening.
That's Israel. Where God has established his method of worship, his method of dealing with sin.
Right.
So because as you would see that out of Alexander, the Persian Empire reinstates Israel and the worship of the true God, which you're going to see later on.
Yes.
But this power now, he wants to usurp that activity upon himself.
That's right. And guess what? This clearly was identified as Rome, right? The little horn,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
this little horn came this little horn came right after the Medes
Greece.
and the Persians and Greece.
Yeah.
After the Medes and the Persian and Greece, this little horn, this little power. So, and the only power that came after them, of course, was Rome.
Yeah.
Now, how did he usurp the responsibility of the heavenly priest? How did he interrupt the continual worship of God? They instituted certain dogmas in this system. So what are we talking about now? The priestly, when we're talking about Christ's continual priestly ministry in the heavenly sanctuary, this power takes away the daily. So by the horn, they introduce things like the priesthood system here on earth. They instituted things like sacrifice of the mass. They also instituted the confessional. Now, this is attacking God's priesthood system, because only God alone can forgive sins, and only Him that one should really confess sins to, not to man down here. So they set up the confessional. They set up things like the worship of Mary. So when they do all these things now, they took away the knowledge. They took away the knowledge of people who are supposed to be relying upon the ministry of God in the heavenly sanctuary.
Yep.
This is how this power, as we read here in Daniel 8, how it stretches its power all the way to usurp God's authority. Setting up the church set up itself in a way where man now start to have confidence in the papal church and believing in it and in its power to forgive sins and to change laws and rules and to believe in God. See, that's the little horn power right there.
So in other words, they start playing little gods.
Yes, they start playing little God.
Okay.
Start playing little gods. Yes. All right. You need to add anything more here before we move on to?
No, you can continue. Move on.
So let's look at the question here that Daniel asked. Because when the presumption of the little horn power leads to a cry, a certain cry, and the cry was, how long? When Daniel saw that was in verse let me see, where was that? Verse 13. Then I heard one saint speaking, another said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice? How long? That kind of cry there, how long, is a lament.
Yeah.
How long will this vision be? Daniel was kind of confused here, right?
Yeah.
And whenever you hear, there are so many places in the Bible where the word how long is used, the question, how long? And when that question was asked in the Bible, it was asked because the present situation, whoever was asking the question wanted the present situation to be changed.
Yeah, because what he saw was not good.
It is a cry that is directed by God's people to the Lord. Yes.
What he saw wasn't good.
Huh?
What Daniel saw in vision wasn't good.
Yes.
So you really want how long will this last for?
How long will this last for?
Yeah.
So it's a what we would call that is like, it's a lament. It's a lament over continuous distress.
Yeah.
And think of it. If we are going through situations here and it's distressing, we're gonna say, man, how long am I gonna be in this, man? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's a lament over continuous distress. It's a plea for a change. And sometimes we put up on and say, Lord, how long are you gonna have me in this kind of condition? But in other words, then it is like it's a call for judgment. Lord, you have to do something for me. How long are we gonna be like this? It's a call for judgment, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when we ask a question like that, we ask a question like that because we realize and we know that God is the one who will finally triumph.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
He will
Yes.
finally triumph.
Yeah.
So when we study and understand the timeline here of this prophetic timeline, you think we can remain silent after we understand this prophetic timeline?
No, we cannot.
No, we can't remain silent. Can you think of any situation in Kingston in which you have asked God the same question? How long?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well,
Wish to
right now
share
I cannot.
if you.
I cannot really think of that really. Ask God how long. Maybe I did, but maybe years ago an unconscious state, right? Something was bothering. Says,
Yeah,
how
but
long?
even
Yeah.
the time we are living in now,
Yeah.
we wonder to when we see the conditions around us, we wonder to ourselves and we ask God the question, Lord, how long? How
How
long, God,
long? How
we're
long we
gonna
allow
be
something
suffering.
in?
We're gonna you see, yeah, we're gonna see these things.
Yeah.
And when we ask these kind of questions, we are actually saying that
Mm-hmm.
God is indeed in control.
Yeah.
Because notice, we don't ask the president how long.
Mm-hmm.
We don't ask. I cut off here. We don't ask our church how long. The question how long is directed to a supreme being
Yeah.
because he is actually in control,
Yeah.
right? So then let's get into this part now, which is Ella Kingston's favorite section,
Okay.
verse 14.
Um, before just to the audience, we are working to make this more interactive. Hopefully,
Yes,
before the month of January finish, we're gonna set something in place where you can call in to ask your
yes,
question. Because we want more participation from our audience, right? So, Brother Rodney,
yeah.
we heard you, and we are working to really make this happen. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Last
Well, in
week,
fact, Pastor had promised us that we would have had was gonna
yeah,
set up but he went off on vacation. So
right. So
I don't think that
we
happened.
work.
But we're gonna have that.
Yeah. All right. Last week I gave an assignment to our listening audience. Ask them
Mhm,
to read Ezra chapter 5, 6, and 7.
mhm.
Why? When you read the book of Ezra, Ezra give you a clear indication as to what Daniel is here talking about. The question was
Yes,
when Daniel asked the question in verse 13 of chapter 8, how long? The response
yes,
came to Daniel unto 2,300 evening and morning or days.
yes.
Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Now, for
Mm-hmm.
many people, their question is, how do I know when that time start? And here, Ezra gave the Bible tells us there were three decrees given.
Yeah,
Three decrees given by three kings.
right.
If you take your Bibles and turn to Ezra chapter 6.
That's right. Ezra chapter 6.
Ezra chapter 6.
Right.
Right, Ezra chapter 6 and verse 13.
Mm-hmm.
Right there we
You
will
want me to read that?
see.
You want me to read that, Ella?
Thank you.
Let me read that. Ezra chapter 6 and verse 13 says,
Verse 14
then
rather.
verse
14.
verse 14 says, and the elders of the Jews builded, and they prospered through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And they builded and finished it according to the commandment of God of Israel, and according to the commandment of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. Three commands.
Right. So here we see now the
Yes.
Bible gave us the three kings that gave the three decrees. Right. And
Three
when
decrees.
you read the
Yeah.
entire chapter 6, you will see that when the temple was finished, right? When the temple was finished, and we know that this year take us to the year 457. The year
Mm-hmm.
457 BC. So what I would like for you to do,
Right.
audience, you can take note of. I'm going to give you three texts, three verses that will indicate you the three decrees that was given. The first decree can be found in Ezra chapter 5, verse 13.
Right.
Ezra chapter 5, verse 13.
Let me read
But
that quickly. Let me read that quickly, Elder. Let me read that. Let me read that. Ezra 5
yeah,
and
yeah,
verse 13. I want the folks to follow up with us. But in the first year of Cyrus, the king of Babylon, the same King Cyrus made a decree to build this house of God.
right. So the first decree Cyrus gave to build the house of God. Then when we go
Was
over to
that
chapter
followed?
6,
Did that go through? Did that go through?
it started,
All right. Okay. All
but
right.
it didn't complete.
The reason why I'm going to tell you what, right? That's what I'm going to
Yeah,
ask. That's why I ask the question, because
yeah,
you cannot really refer to that one as this specific date, because it wasn't really accomplished.
that's right. So that's the first
Okay. Next
decree.
one.
The second
That's all right.
decree
Next one.
is chapter 6, verse 8.
Verse 8. Let me
Yeah.
read that for us. Chapter 6 and verse 8, which says, um, moreover, I make a decree what ye shall do to the elders of the Jews, to the elders of these Jews, for the building
Mhm.
of this house of God, that of the king's goods, even of the tribute beyond the river, forthwith expenses be given unto these men, that they may not be hindered. That's right.
Right. So here, the second king gave the second instruction. But
Mm-hmm.
we know when you read later on, we see that what they were interrupted,
Yes,
right?
they were.
Tobias and Sambalat
Right.
interrupt them from
Interrupted. Right. Mm-hmm.
building the wall. Then when you
Right.
go to chapter 7, yes,
Mm-hmm.
chapter 7, verse 11.
All right, let me read that. Right, I'm right here, chapter 7, verse 11. Now, this is the copy of the letter that the king Artaxerxes gave unto Ezra the priest, the scribe, even a scribe of the words of the commandment of the Lord and of his statute to Israel.
Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
this is a decree that as Adventists we believe that was acted upon. Because
Right.
remember, he said, okay, take all the Jews, go back to Jerusalem and rebuild. And remember, as asked a question, and he said, okay, don't fight with money. I am going to send you with my treasury secretary, as it were. So whatever you need in accomplishing this task, and you know what really blew my mind is that these men who were Eden King, right? They were all Eden King. They had an high regard for the God of Israel.
Right.
They had a high regard for the God. In other words, in my mind, they knew the God of Israel, even though they were Eden, right? So maybe they worship in some form, but they realized that because they inquired from the writing of Jeremiah the prophet, right? When Jeremiah said that they shall be in bondage for 70 years, remember?
Mm-hmm.
And when they realized and they count the time, they realized, no, 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 no. It is time for these people to go back home to rebuild their house
Right.
and worship God. They even they give Ezra, the priest, and the specifically the Levite, based on Moses' instruction.
Mm-hmm.
Or they went way back into the beginning of the earthly sanctuary system that
Right.
God gave Moses, and they said to Ezra, whatsoever is written in the law of Moses, make sure you fulfill it to the letter. the bullocks, the rams, all this animal for a sacrifice, the heathen king give Ezra for the celebration after the completion of the sanctuary.
Perfect. Wonderful. Now, while we are still on this subject here, we still have to look at, we're still talking about the whole matter of the judgment, because the cleansing of the sanctuary is really talking about judgment, right? And this section that we're looking at here, Daniel chapter 8 and verse 14, actually, is also talking about the restoration of the holy, or the restoration of the sanctuary, right? And this deals with some of it, a solution to many of the problems that were mentioned previously to this question here. Now, not only will judgment be against the little horn power, because when this is completed, it's going to be judgment against the little horn power, but the sanctuary will also be cleansed. And when the sanctuary is cleansed, God's people will also be given their rightful state, right? And it's just like, this has a parallel, just like the Day of Atonement in the book of Leviticus 16. When all this is done, God's people will be given their rightful state. Right now, God's people go through all kind of oppression and depression and problems. But the cleansing of the sanctuary is going to be done also on our behalf. It's going to be done on our behalf, right? And yes?
Now, I want to look at verse 25 of chapter 8. Okay, if we can read from verse 23. In other words, talking about the things that this power is going to do. Through his cunning, he shall cause deceit to prosper under his rule. He shall exalt himself in his heart. He shall destroy many in their prosperity. He shall even rise against the prince of the Most High. But, remember we said this last week? But he shall be broken without human hand.
That's the same thing I just mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Same thing I just mentioned earlier. When the Lord shall put in his appearance, right? No one can usurp God's authority. And this power, this last power here, the little horn power that will be the power to strive and to do all kinds of things, cannot continue forever. His power will be broken, as we seen, as it was mentioned here. It shall be broken. But while we see on earth where all the various powers were destroyed by the intervention of man and their artillery and their strength,
this one was not.
This one was not. No. This one's power is going to be broken without hand.
Yeah.
And listen to me, God has a reason why he allowed this power to be broken without hand, because when you think of it, mankind can't break this power.
Yeah.
This power is universal.
Yep.
Mankind can't break this power. The power of the papacy is all over the world, because the Bible said the whole world wonder, after that.
After the beast, yeah.
Yes. So this power cannot be broken by man. God himself has to show where he's in charge. And when he's finished with the cleansing of the whole sanctuary, break his power. Now, a question here, can you tell us what does the phrase cleansing of the sanctuary suggest? You want to take that one, Kingston? What does the cleansing of the sanctuary suggest?
Okay, if we go back to Leviticus, Exodus and Leviticus, right? You would notice that the cleansing of the sanctuary was a yearly, one day in a year event. During the year, the sins of the Israelites pile up in the temple. One day, the high priest had to atone for himself, atone for everything in the sanctuary, then atone for the sins of the people. In other words, they cleanse.
You're talking about the earthly one. You're talking about the earthly. Talking about the earthly sanctuary here. You're talking about the earthly sanctuary.
Because remember, the earthly sanctuary is
Mhm.
represented or a model of the heavenly. So
Yes.
the event that occur on the earthly sanctuary will occur in the heavenly sanctuary, right?
Hmm.
Which we are building up to, right? So the
Right.
cleanse of the sanctuary basically means the removal of sin from the people of God.
Hmm.
Because when we pray, when we confess our sins, because Christ is in the sanctuary, that's where they're placed,
Okay.
right? Their place there is the
So
same that
let's look
happened
at
on
it from
earth.
let,
Yeah,
yes, let's look at it from the heavenly point of view. The
yeah.
cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary, as Brother Rodney asked here. They,
Uh,
remember, I mentioned that the earthly sanctuary did not have the books with records, but the heavenly
yeah,
sanctuary had that. So the records are kept of every deed, everything. The
yeah.
cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary is the removal of the records
Of
of
sin.
the acts of sin from the sanctuary.
Yeah,
And when it is removed from the sanctuary, it has to be taken somewhere else.
yeah,
Now when it is removed from the sanctuary, it will be taken up. It will be taken upon the devil.
yeah.
He will bear the weight of the sins of every human being
Yeah,
who have given their heart to the Lord. Right.
yeah.
So just like on the earthly sanctuary, where the hand was rest upon the
The head of
sins
the
of the people were placed upon the scapegoat,
yeah,
and it was led away into the wilderness, show a total banishment of the enemy. The cleansing of the records of sin in the heavenly sanctuary means that God will remove the record of sin from God's people and set them free.
yeah.
And therefore, all the sins of the people will be placed upon the enemy, which will
Mm-hmm.
usher in Christ's coming, and everything will be placed upon Satan, and he will bear the weight and the burden of every sin of mankind. So the
Yeah.
cleansing of the sanctuary suggests removal of the record of sin
Mm-hmm.
from the sanctuary, which was stored there after
Yeah.
it was presented there, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, Ella Kingston, we next when we come back next week, we can't go into Daniel 8 verse 14 into the whole timeline without a chart. It
Yeah,
makes
but
no
see,
sense.
you need well, it really start from verse 20 of chapter 9,
Yeah.
right? So
Yes, yes.
I was about to ask you if you walk with the chart today.
No, you can't go, and we don't have that much time. We have 8 minutes left because the women have their book about 5 o'clock. The chart takes time to cover from 457 BC
Yeah.
all the way to 1844. And we want to have that on our screen so that our members could follow on. Pastor
Yeah.
has that, and because he didn't get to make it to the study, but he has a chart, and the chart, and whether or not he has a chart, I would suggest, Elkins, that you have it prepared. If you have it prepared next week, because
Okay.
we're going to touch over into that area, which is one of the subject area that a lot of our members need to know how to calculate the different phase here of
Okay.
the judgment from 457 BC all the
Right
way to
on.
1844, and the different events that took place in between. This is
Mm-hmm.
going to be the study where we can have visual, which everybody who's watching can see, and hopefully they can call in to ask the question. When we want them to see what we're talking about, the difference between the last 7 days, how the 7 days come, how it break in half, how you have AD 31 and all the way to AD 34 and what happened, or you have the 62 weeks and all that. We need to show them that on the chart so that at least they can get a chance to see for themselves. And I'm sure by the time we're done with the study, every one of our 7-day Adventists who are watching, of our members who are watching this study, will get a clearer understanding
Yeah.
of the 2300 days chart, right? The 2300
Mm-hmm.
days chart.
So
Anyway, we
therefore,
have a few minutes. Yep.
so
Yep.
therefore, we should give them homework to
Well,
read back Daniel
you're the
chapter
homework man.
9.
Yes,
Huh?
you're the homework man. You've been giving out homework. So go ahead and give the homework. So what's our
Yeah,
homework for next week? Because we're going to
read
go into
Daniel
the
chapter
chart
8
next
and
week and
9.
read Daniel chapter 8 and chapter 9, because chapter
Yeah,
9 is where the breakdown of the chart comes in,
right.
right?
And then now,
And I would suggest, here's how you're going to do your homework. When you touch over into Daniel chapter 9, when you touch over into Daniel chapter 9, you are going to get a pen or a pencil and draw a straight line.
Yeah.
Draw a straight line. Okay? And when you draw the straight line, as you read along and see where it mentioned the first cutoff section, you're gonna put a little stroke on the line, like when we used to do number line in school, right? And you're gonna do your own little chart. So that's when we start it next week. If make sure you're following on it. Wherever you get it wrong, you will put in whatever you need to put in. If you get it right, tap yourself on the shoulder. So draw a straight line next week and everybody's gonna put at the beginning of the line 457 BC.
Right. Excellent.
Right? Because that's the last decree that was given by Artaxerxes, king of Persia.
Yeah.
That was that year that decree was given. The other 3 decrees don't count because you cannot count the one on which they didn't start. You count the decree on the one which started, which is the one that Artaxerxes gave in 457 BC. So everybody gonna draw that straight line. If you want to start it this week so you can continue and start right at the beginning, you're gonna put in 2 numbers. You're gonna put 457 BC at the beginning of the line. And what do you think they should put at the end of the line, Elder Kingston?
Now leave the end. Leave the end for last.
Leave the end for last. All right. So let's put in the starting point because we are already established based on the 3 texts you gave, in Ezra, which is the starting point of the building, right?
Yeah.
Of the 2,200 days. So draw your line at the beginning, 457 BC, and we're gonna have a concise and comprehensive study going straight through there, going right through there until the end. So that's a study that is going to take up the whole afternoon when we get back. So what's your closing statement here, Elder Kingston, as we're wrapping up here?
As I said last week, the word but he shall be broken without human hand. No matter what we see happening in our world today, God is the one who has the final say.
Yes.
So once we remain faithful to him, when he speaks, when he acts, he will be acting in our favor, in my favor. And so we can all be a part of the but.
Yes.
But no matter, it is scary because Daniel was at the end of Daniel chapter 8. The Bible said, and I, Daniel, fainted and was sick.
Yes.
6 days, because he saw that this is very, very deep. This is affecting our soul salvation.
Right.
It's affecting our relationship with God, what this power is doing. All right. So, but at the end of it, we realize that, okay, God wins.
Amen.
And once we're on God's side, we too will win.
Wonderful. Thank you, Elder Kingston. My closing thought is I too join with the lament over continuous distress. And I too ask the question, how long, Lord? We are not given the timeline. We are not told when. Nevertheless, we're going to ask how long, because we ask how long because we are having a plea here for divine judgment. And we know that the only one who can administer the divine judgment is God above. We also have this plea because we know that God will finally triumph. We also ask this plea because we know that there's a supreme power above who's in charge. I can't ask you, Elder Kingston, I can't ask none of the elders how long. I can only ask the one supreme being how long.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm just asking of the how long. I pray that God will prepare us that when the how long is satisfied, we are found on the right side.
Amen.
God bless you all for joining our study this evening. We look forward to an exciting study next week. Come with your number line. Come with your line. Because we're going to go through the 2,300 days timeline, phase by phase, until we reach to the end. And we want to make sure everybody's happy and understand it. You should be able to understand from there going forward. Thank you, Elder Kingston, for your contribution this evening. And thank you those who have sent in their comments and their questions. We still need to have more people taking part. But I hope and trust when we have the phone line that we can call and we can ask our questions that is supposed to be based on the study. We're not dealing with no questions outside of the study. We're dealing with questions that are relating to the study. Because there are people who will ask questions that has nothing to do with the study. We're focusing on the study. we look forward to that. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. I think it's enough time for the women to have their book club. We don't want to infringe upon their time. And so I want to thank you all for joining in. And thank you, Brother Rory, for your question. Thank you, Sister Claire, for your comment. Thank you, Sister Claudette Wright, for your comment. We thank you all for joining in this evening. Until next week, God bless you real good. Have a wonderful evening.
Amen.